Thank you, Mark. Um, yeah, thank you all for being here and holding this space. I was happy to see that this slot was open. And it was in part informed by that line from the Piyut Achot Ketana that Mark mentioned. May the curses of the previous year be lifted and the blessings of the forthcoming year come in. Achot Ketana means little sister. So I love that image of taking care of ourselves, taking care of each other, and being related. And as I was preparing, thinking through what I wanted to offer, it became clear I wanted to offer a meditation on listening, on hearing. But as I was preparing, I came across a line from my teacher, Reb Zalman, who taught before we can hear each other, we have to be able to grieve together. And without forcing anything, I'm not saying you are feeling grief, but if you are, there's permission for that. And to acknowledge the grief and the difficulty as we stand at the edge of hoping and praying for sweetness and blessing. Even though this is a Rosh Hashanah, it is also a Sof Hashanah, the end of a year, and really honoring the tension between wanting renewal and what is new and letting go and metabolizing or processing or integrating or being with what has already come. So we're standing in a mezuzah moment, in a threshold moment. As I was included on the message to others who were preparing this week's meditations, the note was, can you blow shofar for us, which we have been doing throughout this month. But on this last day of Elul, we don't blow the shofar, almost in anticipation of the many blasts and the great hearing that we're supposed to practice on Rosh Hashanah. And even before we go more deeply into listening, I want to name that Tashlich as a part of this holiday of going to water and like casting off. So with your hands or with your neck or with your toes, with your body, I want to invite you to just cast off a little bit of energy that feels excessive or unnecessary. If it's even in your eyes, of like looking at the screen, you won't really need your eyes for this meditation. When we get to the Shema part of prayer, some have the custom of covering their eyes. This does help amplify, but really just throw away any excess energy, and when that feels complete, coming to some form of rest and bringing your attention to your physical ears and maybe lovingly touching or stretching or connecting with the sides of your head, your neck, any tension around the ear being invited to soften. You may want to pull gently, very, very gently on the earlobes, making a little bit more physical space for the ear. Now, you may have heard that this whole month of Elul has a backronym, an acronym reverse cast to say that the word Elul stands for the verse Ani ledodi v'dodi li. I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine, and it's a time of intimacy, of coming close, of tshuva me'ahava, of returning out of love. But not only the first letters of that word is interesting, of that verse is interesting, but the last, ani ledodi v'dodi li, each of those words ends with the yud, the smallest little letter. And the entire month of Elul in the mystical tradition is also the month of the yud, of really getting small and humble, and inside our ear are the smallest muscle and the smallest bone in our body, the stapes muscle and the stapedius bone. And it's through this bone is 3 millimeters long. That's just like a little seed or crumb on your thumb. Through this tiny little bone and through this tiny little muscle and through the little yud, we have an exquisite sensitivity. It's actually the sensitivity that makes the year past so overwhelming, how much we're being bombarded with in terms of the news and the input and the challenges of life and living. But it's also this little yud, these little nitzutzot, these little sparks of hope and faith and glimmers of the possibility of a new year that we're listening for, the still small voice. Nishmoa kol shofar, 100 blasts to wake us up and to inspire and sensitize us. But these tiny muscles and these tiny bones can get really fatigued. In fact, that's their job. If something startles us, something loud and sudden, the muscle, this tiniest muscle in our body, contracts to stabilize that bone, to prevent it from rattling, from shaking too much. And so as we practice today, listening, and I say listening because my friend Mary, who was in her 90s when she said this, she said, I have hearing aids, but sometimes I need listening aids. And the invitation to soften the smallest parts of us, and to get granular and specific about where we might be holding tension that can be shaken off and return to the river, return to the ocean, return to the cosmic sea. So whether eyes open or shut, using sound as the object of our awareness. And at first, you may notice the hum of your computer fan or the instructions of my voice or the creaking of your building or traffic outside. Whatever sounds there may be, they come and they go. They have a rise, a transit, and a set. Some sounds may delight us, like the bird outside my room right now. Some sounds may bring up a desire to control or push away. And notice that we have no control over the sounds. We can't predict sounds or keep them after they have dissolved. There might be sounds from the inside of your body, gurgling or popping and crackling, or the sound of your breath. And if this practice is challenging, it might be supportive to choose the sound of your breath, to listen for your inhalation and your exhalation without needing to change it. Just, is there a sound as air comes in? Is there a sound as air goes out? But if you don't want or need an anchor, you can just open to sound in general. Sounds near and sounds far. Sounds you may identify, sounds you may not be able to identify. Listening from the most kitana, the most small parts of ourselves. listening now. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ahad Shanti Medavaya. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay.
You so much, Shir Meira. Beautiful listening practice, and so grateful to you. Friends, we seal the practice as we do each day. We offer an opportunity, if you're in mourning, you're observing a yard site, if it's your custom to join in the mourner's Kaddish, to do so. If you're not reciting Kaddish, we ask you please stay present for those who are for a few minutes, offering your compassionate support in their time of loss. If you're reciting Kaddish, if you'd like to share the name or names of those you're honoring today in the chat, you can do so now or after we recite Kaddish. The chat is open for that purpose. And if you're reciting Kaddish, I invite you to join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yikadal, Yikadash, Shemei Rabbi. Yama, Malkute, Yamich, Malkute, B'chayimon, Yemikon, Yechol, B'Israel, Hagala, Bisman, Yibru,
Amen.
Ishmei
Rabba,
Rabba,
Ishmael, Maya,
Barach, Yishtabach, Bahai, Yamam,
Leila Mikol Birchata Shiata
Ushakata, Nechamata,
Amiram Yamad Amin Amarabam Shemaya Chayim Aleinu Yachid Israel Amin Salam B'Nimah Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yachol Yisrael Ya'akol Yisrael Shimru Amen.
Friends, thanks so much for joining us today. If you're leaving us now, I want to wish you Hashanah Tova, Umutuka. May there be sweetness, may there be hope, may there be good health, may there be many, many blessings for you in 5785. And we'll look forward to seeing you hopefully back next week. We'll be here for a full week of practice next week. Of course, we will not be meeting tomorrow or Friday as we observe Rosh Hashanah, but we'll see you on Monday. And you're welcome, of course, to stay with us, continue to sit with that beautiful listening practice that Shir Meira invited us into, or to join us for a conversation about that practice, or share reflections in the chat, which is open. And if you have a question, please preface it by writing question all in caps, and I'll keep an eye out for that and try to incorporate it. Roberta, thanks. I see you're a first timer, and anyone else who joined us perhaps for the first time today. So delighted to have you, and the door is always open, and we're always plenty of seats, plenty of meditation cushions here. So join us whenever you can, whether live or on recording. So, Shamir, thank you so much. I'm really just full of gratitude and feeling what a nice way to end truly, truly tough year. So I have a few questions. Um, uh, the listening, first of all, I think it was really helpful to hold up that, when you're doing mindfulness meditation, you don't have to focus on the breath. A lot of people think that. So you really can choose a number of different anchors, one of which is the soundscape, the land, and to me, that's always just changes the framework completely. So like, well, let me just sit for however long that period is, um, and listen to this podcast that's going on right now around me, right? And I could I could think, oh, that will be boring, you know, that's not going to be entertaining. Um, I'll listen to a real podcast or something, or music or something that's going to entertain me in some way. So, but then it is really, I find, to share this, that I find it's like, wow, this is interesting. I can stay with this for a while. So I want to invite you to share a little bit what that's like for you. And just to tack on kind of a related question, I was also thinking about, well, what about people for whom that's not available? For some people, breathing is not available because it can trigger trauma related experience, and et cetera, et cetera. So like, and obviously there are people for whom listening is not available. So I wanted to see if you had a suggestion in cases like that, like how would you adapt this for someone who doesn't have that sense available to them?
Yeah, so rich, multiple questions in there.
Yeah, sorry, I packed in a
No,
couple
I
there.
love it,
I
and
packed in the follow-up in the one
it's
question.
good. I'll try to track it all. I offered both listening with an anchor and listening without an anchor, right? So as you said, mindfulness does not only have to be of one. The breath is very convenient sensations of breathing because breath is always with us. Um, uh, Anchoring on the sound of breathing might actually be a way in for people for whom the tactile or the felt sense of the breath
Mhm.
isn't accessible for any number of reasons. So listening to breathing, and there are even forms of like yogic breathing, like ujjayi breathing, ocean sounding breath, where you purposefully amplify the anchoring effect of both the breathing so you can hear it, but also most of that time was the invitation to just listen to the broadcast already in progress that is the universe.
Mhm.
um, Yeah, sound as a way in may not be accessible, but we think about pedagogy and the types of learners. Much of education now understands we need like multimodal education. So we live in a very visual world, and a lot of information is presented to us through the eyes and what we take in through screens, through text. Some of us need to hear the teachings, Torah Sheba'al Peh, oral teachings. Some of us need kinesthetic or felt movement oriented learning. That's all related to mindfulness. We're not all wired the same way. So I love providing multiple ways in. I would say if it's not accessible, um, don't be gentle with yourself. Don't force it. It's not necessarily your way in. Though if you want to develop the capacity for a listening practice, I really think understanding the physiology of this, that we do literally we stop listening to the world in the same way our hearts constrict and our bodies tense
Mhm.
up around stress, around overstimulation. To be patient, and it's kind of counterintuitive, but the smallest releases in our body can have the most profound effect. So not to muscle through, like I've got to do this, but to really give yourself the time and the slowness to undo whatever resistance you may have to really hearing the world, hearing yourself. Hearing what's going on is really hard to do. This is a defense. I think lions also have stapedius muscle, and theirs contract because if they roared without their ears closed, they would burst their own eardrums. That's how
Wow.
loud a lion's roar is. So, too, our world is overwhelmingly loud sometimes, and these practices of listening for the still small voice invite us to a sensitivity that we need to
Yeah.
take slowly and carefully.
So here's a good question. Like you just said, there's different ways to think about the listening. We can think about it literally, but also in terms of the noise of the world. And Lori's asking, when our ears feel full or clogged, so we can't hear clearly spiritually. And actually, this is a great question for you as someone who does spiritual direction, right? And spiritual counseling, helping people try to hear what, or attend to, or attune to the message that the universe is offering. So in other words, when those ears are clogged, so to speak, when it feels like there's a spiritual, not just a physical reason for, interfering, the interference that comes up. How to clear or be still with this is Lori's question. How do you bring that into play, with the people you work with in spiritual direction?
Yeah. There was for many years a Jewish spiritual training program called Lev Shomea, like the listening heart. And Lev there means like full body, full being, at the heart in the sense of the emotional seat, but also the intellectual and embodied seat. And kind of to increase that coherence, we have at least two ways. We can boost the signal or we can reduce the noise.
Mhm.
And it goes back to my first response around gentleness. We live in a very kind of masculine, machismo kind of culture that wants to power through. How can I be heard? Or how can I get rid of the blockage? Even that kind of paradigm of pathologizing. Reb Zalman also used to say, "You can't hear me, listen louder," right? Which is really, or maybe even listen softer, right? There to honor that there is maybe literal and metaphorical blockage, and listen to that. When I am working with people, I'll go directly into the minya, into the so-called obstacle or the blockage. Rabbi Nachman says the obstacles tell you you're on the path. They're not obstructions. They are simanim baderech. They're what the feeling of not being heard points to is that there's something that wants to be heard. Again,
just as you're saying this, is making me think that, I don't know what people may be doing various things around Rosh Hashanah. Some maybe going to services, some may not. Some may be having meals, etc. But one of the key mitzvot is Yishmoa Kol Shofar. It actually is not that the mitzvah is not sounding the shofar; it's attending to the shofar. And so, I want to thank you because I think this offers. People could do this, tonight, tomorrow, over the course of Rosh Hashanah. You just take time, whether you want to revisit this practice or just take a moment to engage in the practice yourself. It's a beautiful way to really immerse in kind of the heart of the holiday. I think that's a real gift that you're offering us today. The other thing I want to ask you, Shir, is it's a little bit personal, but you have been an artist, a singer, someone who uses your voice, right? And you ended with that beautiful Igun and Achab Sha'alti from Psalm 27. So I know you're still using your voice, but what's it like for you to, I don't know if this is a transition, but I'm conjecturing that there's a transition from someone who's putting out voice to someone who's helping others attune and to listen more deeply, which involves, different kind of spiritual work on your part. Does that make sense?
I was expecting a clearer question at the end there.
Well, I guess I'm thinking about a singer, an artist who, whose spiritual practice is interpreting liturgy, interpreting words, and transforming it into sound, as opposed to what you did with everyone today, which was, guide us into listening to sound. And maybe it's just this, the two sides of the same coin, basically. So maybe I'm answering it for you. I don't know if you experience that way. Like there's whether those feel like different practices or really so very closely related in some way. Does that make more sense?
maybe I chose this day too, like between the edges of the year, because this in between is so potent and paradoxical and fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
whether it was as a, shaliach tzibor leading prayer and singing, there was always the or doing spiritual work, or even the creative process, which is more kind of independent, the tension between what I want to sing and what needs to be sung. Or even as I sing this melody today, just a few
Mm-hmm.
moments ago, how it is both an offering to
Mm-hmm.
the community, but also I am processing the news of the world, the contents of my life, um, the the reshimu, the imprints and the resonance of what has been lived in the past, and being present. And you called in faith or emunah or hope or bitachon and trust in what's coming, and the tension that pulls us constantly between what we know and what we don't know, what is and what isn't, in the sense of it has been or has not yet come. And that for me is actually modeled in the shape of the shofar, which is narrow on one end and expansive on the other, right? There's the something that is, or even when we talk about mindfulness, with an anchor or without an anchor, there's the
Mm-hmm.
specificity and the objectless. And we are these bridge beings kind of stuck in this infinite in between, which sometimes is really very sweet and other times is really confounding and disorienting. And we're all just like joining each other in this moment, or in this tension between the two.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for letting us into, your experience of that. That's really, I can relate to it, and it's really quite beautiful. Okay, I think I have another question, but it's way too big for 2 minutes. So
But you can ask it and it
I
wouldn't
can
be.
ask it. The question that's coming up for me is, it was prompted by a question in the chat. Because we have prayers where we have prayers in the Mahzor and in the prayer, in the Jewish liturgy in general, where we ask God to hear our prayer. So I was going to ask you, and if there is, unless you have a very pithy answer, let's table it for another day. What does that mean? Like we are practicing listening deeply here. Is there a distinction between that? Like when we're praying for God to hear us, are we really praying for us to be able to hear the world, for the divinity and us to be able to be receptive? Can we turn that around for those who are not thinking about a God who's like, hello, waiting to wake up and hear us, but actually can reframe that in some way?
I'll just ask the question, what does it mean not only to address the lishmoa kol shofar, or like lishmoa tefillah, to address someone or some being or something external that hears prayer, or what does it mean to be asked to be a shoma'at, to be
Listener,
someone who
right?
hears prayer, who listens to prayer, who listens for what prayer is?
All right, well, we did it. We got it in. Amazing.
Sealed
All
it
right.
up.
All right.
Shana
Beautiful to be
tova
with you.
u'mituka.
Shana tova, you to you too and your family. It's just a real thanks for the gift of spending the time with us today. And so glad to have you back,
Yeah,
among the
thank you
teachers
again
here
for
on this
being
set.
here, all of you. For this is a special place to be together.
Thank you. Thanks to Natalie for holding our space. I should mention very quickly that I'll be co-leading a mindfulness service at B'nai Jeshurun in New York City, which for those of you who are in the city, you're welcome to attend. You do have to register, and you can also join online, but you have to register. I think it's bj.org if you're interested. That's not tomorrow, it's the second day of Rosh Hashanah, 9 a.m. Eastern time for those who might be interested. That's with Rabbi Shuli Passo and Kenner David Mintz. And so it's been a great experience. So if you're looking for a place for a second day, you're welcome. I hope you'll join us. And with that, wishing everyone a Shana Tova. May the blessings begin.